In video released by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Asian workers are seen shackled and getting onto a bus after an ICE raid on a Hyundai Motor car battery facility in Georgia. 300 Koreans were arrested in Thursday's raid.
Señores, Donald se arrepiente luego de que ICE deportó a 300 trabajadores surcoreanos y ahora los pide de vuelta. Así es, señores, hoy vamos a hablar una vez más de un tema que nos muestra cómo Trump se ha metido en otro problema gigantesco. Y no exagero porque prácticamente se ha pegado un tiro en el pie con la forma en la cual está manejando las relaciones con Corea del Sur. ¿Cuál fue el resultado? Corea del Sur decidió cerrar la billetera y dejar de invertir en Estados Unidos. Solo imaginen esto, señores, hablamos de un proyecto de $12,000 millones de Hyundai. Más de 300 trabajadores surcoreanos que estaban entrenando a empleados estadounidenses para levantar una planta de baterías en Georgia. Una inversión que pudo haber sido un motor económico enorme para esta región. Pero Trump lo arruinó. Y ahora, en este giro inesperado y desesperado, Trump prácticamente anda suplicando en redes sociales que esos trabajadores regresen. Y no solo ellos, sino que también pide que vengan técnicos de otros países. El problema es que este desastre ya generó un efecto dominó. No solo Corea del Sur desconfía, sino que ahora toda Asia y buena parte del mundo dicen lo mismo. ¿Por qué vamos a invertir en un país donde el gobierno trata a los trabajadores extranjeros como criminales? Señores, el karma le llega al trumpismo. Bueno, pues Trump publicó mensajes donde está intentando justificarse, diciendo que Estados Unidos necesita que vengan expertos de afuera para poder entrenar a los trabajadores locales. Porque de lo contrario, pues esas inversiones jamás van a llegar. Habla de semiconductores, de barcos, chips, computadoras, incluso de la industria naval, recordando cuando Estados Unidos construía un barco al día y bueno, pues ahora apenas logra uno al año. Pero claro, ese discurso se cae cuando lo contrastamos con la realidad. Mientras él pide que no se asusten los inversionistas, su administración despliega agentes de ICE para detener, encadenar, deportar a esos mismos trabajadores. Una contradicción absoluta. Y lo más grave es que esto no tiene marcha atrás, porque estamos viviendo en un mundo que está interconectado, donde los países dependen uno de otros. Antes Estados Unidos era el lugar seguro, donde el mundo prácticamente quería invertir su dinero. Y ahora con Trump en el poder, la imagen que se proyecta es la de un régimen caótico, autoritario y poco confiable. Para que puedan ver un momento lo que pasó con el tema esto de los trabajadores surcoreanos, aquí les muestro la escena. Pongamos el clip.
In video released by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Asian workers are seen shackled and getting onto a bus after an ICE raid on a Hyundai Motor car battery facility in Georgia. 300 Koreans were arrested in Thursday's raid.
Pero claro, eso no es todo porque ICE no solo los arrestó, sino que también hizo un video propagandístico. O sea, como si fuera a mostrar un trofeo con estos trabajadores esposados. Y sí, señores, esa grabación fue portada en Corea del Sur. Miren esto.
GSP in position, north side.
Y luego los 316 trabajadores, exactamente, que habían sido detenidos en Georgia, regresaron a Seúl y así fueron recibidos de retorno en el aeropuerto. Incluso tenemos las voces de algunos de los trabajadores y sus familias hablando sobre lo sucedido. Escuchen.
그렇게 남아서 일하고 싶은 사람은 없었을 것 같아요.
Nobody is going to stay and work when it's like this.
다음에도 다 같이 나갈까라는 생각도 좀 들기도 하고.
After this situation, we considered leaving our jobs.
굳이
I don't know how the visa will work next time, and there will be some people who need to go there, but I have to think about it.
해봐야 되겠습니다.
They went there to help the U.S. The U.S. side also wanted them to work there, but now they are being treated like criminals, which feels very unpleasant. Since they're not actual criminals, the fact that they were taken away like that, I think that's a real problem.
Y aquí, amigos, entra un detalle clave, y es que el presidente de Corea del Sur, Lee, había dado unas declaraciones antes de que ocurriera todo este escándalo, y él dijo que estaba preocupado porque Trump le hiciera un Zelensky, ¿no? Es decir, que lo humillara y le arrebatara la soberanía de su país en el despacho Oval. Escuchen al propio presidente Lee diciendo esto.
So first of all, before I met with President Trump today, he posted on Truth Social a very threatening post, which I felt. And then during the press gaggle, he mentioned about the Korean government's investigations regarding the previous government, and he mentioned that he would look into the search and seizure of U.S. bases. And so my staff was worried that we might face a Zelensky moment.
Para rematar, Trump había publicado un mensaje en redes insinuando que en Corea del Sur estaba ocurriendo algún tipo de revolución, y solo basándose en teorías conspirativas que le estaban llegando de grupos de ultraderecha surcoreanos que se hacen llamar literalmente MAGA Corea. Basado en eso, Trump opinó sin tener la menor idea de lo que hablaba. Y durante su reunión en la Casa Blanca, el presidente Lee hasta se burló en la cara de Trump, aunque Trump no se dio ni cuenta, porque Lee le dijo algo como: espero verlo pronto en Corea del Norte, inaugurando un Trump Tower y jugando golf con Kim Jong-un. O sea, una burla total, porque todos sabemos que eso jamás va a suceder, ¿no? Miren este momento.
정말 세계사적인 평화의 메이커로서의 역할을 꼭 해주시기를 기대합니다.
And I would like to mention that the only remaining divided nation in the world is the Korean Peninsula. And I would like to ask for your role in establishing peace on the Korean Peninsula. So I look forward to your meeting with Chairman Kim Jong-un and construction of a Trump Tower in North Korea and playing golf at that place.
아마 기다리고 있을 것 같습니다.
다시 한 번만.
기다리고 있을 것 같습니다.
So I believe he will be waiting for you.
Mientras tanto, pues los supuestos acuerdos comerciales que Trump tanto anunció con Corea del Sur en realidad no existen. No hay papeles firmados, no hay términos vinculantes, solo son promesas vacías y amenazas de sanciones si Corea, pues, no aceptaba. Es más, el propio secretario de Comercio, Howard Lutnick, tuvo que admitirlo en televisión. Escuchen.
To the point on Hyundai, so is the Korea trade deal in jeopardy now?
Well, the Koreans didn't sign when the president was in. Right? The president came in, you remember that? He came to the White House. Notice how we didn't talk about trade? Because he didn't sign the piece of paper. I mean, the devil is in the details always. Well, I think they saw the Japanese now, so there's no flexibility, right? The Japanese signed the contract. The Koreans either accept that deal or pay the tariffs. Black and white. Pay the tariffs or accept the deal.
But has the immigration raid led to more tension there about?
I think you're going to see President Trump go out and address that. He knows that to build these great factories, we need leadership of people who've built them before if he wants to do it fast. So I think he's going to make a deal with the different countries that when they want to build big here, he'll find a way to get their workers proper work visas, meaning short-term work visas, train Americans, and then head home. I think the president is very clear. I think you're going to see an ABC from him. A, you come in, B, you train Americans, and C, you head on.
Y como si esto fuera poco, Trump fue mucho más lejos. Llegó a sugerir que como Estados Unidos tiene tropas en Corea del Sur, deberían entregarle propiedad de sus tierras a cambio. Una propuesta absurda que recuerda cuando quiso comprar Groenlandia, ¿no? O cuando lanzó estas ideas similares sobre Canadá. Aquí lo dijo claramente.
South Korea, would you reduce the number of forces in South Korea so that the United States could have more flexibility in the region? Would you consider reducing the number of U.S. forces in South Korea so that the United States can have more flexibility?
Well, I don't want to say that now because we've been friends and we're friends. And look, we have a lot of people over there. We have over 40,000 troops in South Korea. As you know, South Korea agreed to pay for that during my last term. And then when Biden came in, they complained to Biden that I wasn't a nice person. And he agreed not to pay. He gave up billions of dollars. We were getting paid billions of dollars. But then Biden ended that for whatever reason. It's unbelievable that he did. But we have a very good relationship militarily. They would say, but we gave you land. I said, no, you didn't. You lease us land. There's a big difference between giving and leasing. And maybe one of the things I'd like to do is ask them to give us ownership of the land where we have the big fort. You know, we spent a lot of money building a fort. And there was a contribution made by South Korea. But I would like to see if we could get rid of the lease and get ownership of the land where we have a massive military base.
Al final, amigos, lo que vemos es un presidente que está destruyendo las alianzas históricas que ha tenido Estados Unidos. Está aislando al país y está humillándose en el escenario internacional. Lo peor es que está arruinando oportunidades económicas reales que habrían podido beneficiar a millones de trabajadores estadounidenses, a sus propios votantes. Ahora bien, señores, Trump vuelve con las amenazas porque esta vez ya no va en contra de un enemigo extranjero ni contra sus rivales en Washington, sino que ahora va en contra de Nueva York, su propio estado natal. Está furioso porque la gobernadora Katie Hochul ha respaldado a Zohran Mamdani, candidato progresista, y bueno, su respuesta es advertir que podría retener fondos federales destinados al Estado. Bueno, el contexto breve. En pocas palabras, Hochul apoyó públicamente a Mamdani, político progresista que, como bien sabemos, está incomodando mucho a la ala conservadora. Y a Trump, eso le cayó como una traición personal. Su reacción muy simple, amenazar en cortar recursos federales a Nueva York, poniendo en riesgo miles de millones que financian programas sociales, infraestructura y servicios básicos. Veamos esta noticia.
Joining us now, Democratic consultant and president of Sheinkoff Communications, Hank Sheinkoff, senior editor for The City and Moynihan Public Scholar at City College, Harry Siegel, and executive editor of The Nation, John Nichols. John and Hank, I believe you guys are going to disagree on a couple of things, so let us start with Harry. Harry, Kathy Hochul, the governor, endorses Mamdani. Why did she do it now? What took her so long?
Democrats, mainstream centrist Democrats, let's say, and Kathy Hochul's got to run for election next year. She had a tough time against Lee Zeldin 3 years ago. They're worried about Mamdani as a very useful foil for Trump. First off, politically, he's calling him my little commie, and he's punching at the guy and working out his nicknames and tweaking. Maybe as significantly for the governor, nearly 10% of New York's budget comes from the feds and a bigger share of the state budget. And the punishments and controls Donald Trump has right now, and he's talking openly, joking as he does, not joking, about taking away money, are very serious. And that, I think, was some part of her resistance. And the other part of her resistance was Mamdani has, talked about the police. He says he's going to apologize in the past as a racist and homophobic entity that's a threat to public safety. And as he began his career, staked out more radical positions that are not coming back to haunt him in his race, but that she does not want to be tied to. She did not want to be on the cover of the New York Post today, gussied up, photoshopped up as Che. As she is, but there she is. He won the Democratic primary. No one is catching up with him in the polls, and she decided it was time.
Does she worry about a competitor to the right of her? There was talk about Elise Stefanik maybe running against her. Does she worry about maybe less progressive elements of New York State coming back and threatening her from the right?
I think with her endorsement of Mamdani and maybe some political peace between them, she's less worried about her Lieutenant Governor Carlos Delgado running in the primary. I think Elise Stefanik is a significant threat to her politically. For New Yorkers, by the way, just across the state, the math of what Trump can do if there's a Republican governor who would let him, and Stefanik is very close with Trump, was going to be the UN ambassador, now is going to run, it appears, for governor, that the powers he has, not least with bringing in the National Guard, get way more significant, and the pressures on New York increase immensely. So there's a political threat to Hochul that's very real, and I think an imminent threat to New Yorkers they're going to have to consider if they want a governor and a president who can force New York City to conform or show common sense, or if they think, as I do, that would be a disturbing thing.
You know, it's an interesting time in New York, Hank, because usually it's whoever wins the Democratic primary is a shoe-in to win the mayoral race. And this is the first time since I've been living here 20 years where it's not a real fight, because right now Cuomo is so far behind the polls, and so is Adams, and so is God, I'm blanking on his name. Sliwa, thank you. They're so far behind now. If they two of them dropped out, you might have more of a race here. But this is as divided as this city, I think, has ever been in my experience on the issue of the mayor. Why is there still so much concern from some parts of the city about Mamdani?
Well, look, the city is going through a significant demographic shift. It's much more Asian than not, much more Muslim than not, much less Jewish than not. It's just changing. And when you go through these traumatic elections, you tend to have a demographic shift behind it, number one. Number two, the affordability issue is real. There's no question about it. It's very expensive to live here. But the truth is, it's always been expensive to live here. The job picture is changing dramatically. I mean, the notion of how small storekeepers can function or not, the amount of empty space we have, whether New York City remains as the financial capital of the world is a real question. The growth of the Dallas-Fort Worth corridor is a real threat to us.
So why do you say that? Do you think that there are going to be businesses that flee this city if Mamdani wins?
Absolutely.
Are you sure?
Well, nobody's sure of anything. We predict everything. But the REITs have been pretty clear. There was a story in with Commercial Observer a few weeks ago about REITs and their potential lack of investment. There are people who are going to leave. Why? Because they can. Because there's no need to have to stay here anymore. You can do your business from a computer or a phone any place in the world, and you can certainly move to Florida, where the taxes don't exist in the same way, and lead a reasonable life if you want that.
John, what do you think of as I asked Hank, the concern here in New York City among us, not giant but significant enough portion of the population that they're just not ready for such a progressive mayor?
Well, these have been fights that we've seen in New York for a very long time. I mean, remember, this is not the first time New York has had an intense mayoral race where political party lines are shuffled and where you see, people, kind of lining up against their own nominee or favoring the nominee of another grouping. If you look back to the 1969 race for mayor of New York with John Lindsay, he was a Republican who was endorsed by Democrats like Shirley Chisholm. And so I think that this is one of the realities of New York politics. And I have immense respect for Hank because he's somebody I've followed as a political consultant and thinker for a very long time. And I think a lot of the analysis that he brings to this is wise. The city is changing. The demographics are changing. And also the economic dynamics are always in play. But one of the things that we have to put into the mix here is that Zohran Mamdani won that primary by focusing on an issue that New Yorkers care about passionately. And since he won the primary, he has been engaged in a level of outreach to grassroots Democratic clubs, to unions that backed Cuomo in the primary, and to many, many Democrats who did not support him in the primary, but have come to support him in the general election. That's the job of a candidate, right? You'll face a lot of criticism. You'll face a lot of misstatements and true statements and whatever comes at you. But at the end of the day, if you're running for mayor of a major city, really, I think the most dynamic city in the world, your job is to reach out across all sorts of lines and to build some level of support. What it looks like today is that Zohran Mamdani has done that. And the endorsement from Kathy Hochul is an incredibly significant signal that people who may have been resistant to him at one point are coming to see him as someone who could indeed be not just the mayor of New York, but a successful mayor of New York.
You also don't have Schumer yet. You don't have Jeffries yet, these big names. Let me play a soundbite from Senator Van Hollen talking about the divide within the Democratic Party. And, you can ask yourself who you think he's talking about.
Many Democratic members of the Senate and House representing New York have stayed on the sidelines. That kind of spineless politics is what people are sick of. They need to get behind him and get behind him now.
So, Hank, he's arguing the Democratic Party is not going to fix itself, that they have to start, as he said, being spineless and getting behind the masses of the party. And he believes that Mamdani has got the support of the masses of the party.
Okay. I've worked all over the United States, 44 states. I've worked for president. I've done all this. I've seen it. He's right, because the Democratic Party died a long time ago. And when you have a social movement, which is what Zoran Mamdani is about, not about governance, this is a social movement, not a political party that he's running, you need something to get into. Why? So that you can get on ballots around the country, because most of the states only allow two parties. They don't allow social democrats. He's not a Democrat, he's a social democrat. And they're going to take that dead carcass, they're going to ride it around the country, and we're going to see cities around the country taken over by Democratic socialists. Now, what would those policies mean? Zoran Mamdani can apologize until the moon stops turning that color or whatever it turns. Why? When you talk about cutting $1 billion off the top of the cops, when you talk about getting rid of school safety agents, when you talk about getting rid of specialized school examinations for the Asians, what that means is a great social revolution. How it will work out? Odds are not good. The city was likely to go through a fiscal crisis. I work for municipal unions in the interest of disclosure. I can't.
Bueno, señores, esto es una muestra muy clara del autoritarismo del trumpismo. Si no me apoyas, te castigo. No estamos hablando de su dinero personal, estamos hablando de fondos federales. Dinero que le pertenece al contribuyente, al ciudadano. Señores, usar estos recursos como un chantaje político, ya sabemos que es algo peligroso. Te convierte en ese presidente que es un tipo de caudillo, ¿no? El que reparte premios, castigos, según su conveniencia. Algunos defensores del trumpismo dicen, bueno, que es normal que un presidente priorice a los estados aliados, pero eso no es cierto. En una democracia los fondos federales no son favores personales, es parte de un acto y pacto social. Todos los estados contribuyen, todos los estados reciben. Si un presidente comienza a retenerlos por venganza política, lo que está en juego ya no es el dinero, sino que es simplemente el sistema democrático. Además, veamos el contexto, amigos. Hochul está calculando sus movimientos porque en Nueva York hay una lucha política muy fuerte. Trump intenta meter miedo no solo a ella, sino que a cualquier gobernador político, señores. Solo piensa en las figuras progresistas. Hay un mensaje muy encubierto aquí, y es que si tú apoyas a alguien que no me conviene, yo te voy a hacer pagar el precio. Ahora yo me pregunto qué pasará con otros estados que lo enfrenten, California, Illinois, Massachusetts. ¿Les va a cortar fondos también? Estamos frente a una amenaza directa. El principio de igualdad entre los estados. La idea básica de que un presidente gobierna para todos, no solo para un club político. Pero bueno, señores, ¿qué opinan ustedes? ¿Creen que un presidente debería de tener el poder de retener fondos federales por cuestiones políticas? ¿O será que es una más de muchas señales de por qué Trump representa un peligro para la democracia? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerden, como siempre, dale like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete a nuestro canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.